What is up, guys? Welcome back to the next part of our tutorial. Let's start to the quote. Aristotle said the following, and what is saying here is 100% accurate. With regards to this subject or to programming, you have to code some sort of web pages over and over again. Watch these tutorials over and over again. Search the web for new topics regarding HTML, and that's how you will master the subject. Don't watch this once and expect to be a master of it. Let's move on. Now let's talk about forms. Forms are primarily designed to accept user input, meaning that it enables a user to type in certain things like your username, your email and stuff. So it enables a user to type those in, and then once they click a certain button, that can be submitted to a server for processing. That can be for saving, or maybe for some sort of decision making where they're trying to log in, as you can see in this form. So that is the primary function of forms. Now with forms we have objects or controls, and these are the types of controls that we have here. Of course, this is introduction to HTML, so we won't be covering every control. We're just going to cover the basic ones that are used the most. So as you can see in this form, this is the form that we'll be building in this video, and it's going to be exciting. Let's start by opening Notepad++ as we always do. Remember, you can keep on using Notepad, it's absolutely fine, no problem. So we're going to create a new page, and we're going to copy and paste the basic structure of an HTML page to this page. So we're in footnote now. You can just click on where you saved your own snippets. Let's look for the big bones there. Let's copy this and paste this in our project and remove all the unwanted stuff. Let's save this as an HTML page. This is where we usually save our stuff. Go to the folder that you usually save. We're going to name it form, and don't forget the important part, which is .html. We save it. We go to that folder and we have it there, and as you can see, it's currently empty. So the first thing we're going to do, let's change this to, let's go back to our format. This is the form that we want to create. So the first thing that we want to do is create this login form. So let's type in h1. You can call it anything. And then when you're coding forms, guys, that's the first step that you need to do, is use the form tags. So every control is going to go inside the form tags. And an important attribute to add here is action. Now action will specify where we want to send this information. So if we have another page called process.asp, we're going to send it there for processing. Or maybe we have a page called, so if we have this kind of a page, we can send the information there for processing. So if you don't enter anything within these double quotations, it's gonna come back to the same page. And if you leave out this action attribute, it'll still come back to the same page. So let's first include this. So we can even send this information to another website for processing. So we can send it there to another website or wherever. The thing we need to learn about forms is we have a control and we have a label. So each control has a label regardless of what type of a control it is. So as you can see there, this is a drop down, but it has a label. This is a text box, but it has a label. This is a combo box, but it also has a label. In HTML5, we need to specify the label. So the first thing that we're going to enter here is that drop down box, as we saw in our picture. So this is how you would enter a drop down. We need to give our drop down a name to uniquely identify it from other controls on the form. So you can call it anything. I'm going to call it type, or DRP type. Let's save it. Let's see how far we are. And as you can see, we have a drop down there, but there's nothing inside. Now we need to have options within the drop down. So if you want to have a specific option, you use the option tag. So each option needs to have something displayed inside. So before a user chooses an option, he needs to, select something. So we're going to say admin. We're going to save this and view our progress in the browser, and now we have the option admin. So each option needs to have a value. What's displayed here is for the user. This is what the user is going to see. But what we put in the value is what will be sent to the server. So if I select this admin, this will be sent to the server, not this. This is just for displaying purposes for the user. So I can type two different things here. I can type in the entire name and say I can display this for the user. I can display administrator for the user, but then when I send this form, admin will be sent and not administrator. So let's add other options. Let's save this, go to the browser, and then now when we view this, we have other options. So when I click cashier and send this form, cash will be sent. When I click packer, pack will be sent. So that's how drop downs work. But then we need a label. As you can see, we need a label here for the drop down. So we use the label tag. So the label tag has an opening and a closing tag. For displaying purposes, what we want to display to the user, we put in between the tags, and we're going to save this, refresh, and now we have the label there. And we need to add this attribute to the label tag. Now this will tell the browser that this label is for this select dropdown. So we need to take the name of this dropdown, copy and paste it there. So now the browser knows that this label is linked to this control. That's how it works. Let's add another control. Let's add a text box. So when you want to add a text box, you use the input tag. The input tag is an empty tag in that it does not have a closing tag, and you need to specify using the type attribute what type of an input object do you want here. We're going to say text. You're going to save this, refresh it, and we have a text box there. We don't want this next to the drop down, so we need to enter a BR tag. So this will take us to the next line. Refresh, so now this is on the next line. So we need to give our text box a name. We're going to call it, we can call it anything. So now that it has a name, we need to, as you can see, it doesn't have a label, so we need to put a label there. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it there, and this label, we need to link it to this text box. So we take this name and paste it in there for this one. So now they're linked, and then we need to say this is for displaying purposes. This is what will be displayed on the page. Refresh. As you can see now, we have a label for this text box. Now let's enter an email object. So we use the input tag. We need to change the type to email, and let's give it a name. I'm going to call it txt email. Save it, As you can see, it appears next to this, so the email looks the exact same way like a text box, but it has some validations. We'll look at that. We don't want this to be in the same line, so we use the BR tag. We save it, refresh, it's on the next line. We need to display something for the user so that he knows that he needs to enter an email here. So we're going to enter a label. So we change the for, we link it to this control. For displaying purposes, we say email so that the user knows. Save it, back to the browser, and now the user will know, okay, I need to enter an email here. Next, we're going to enter the password control. I'm going to copy this, paste it here. So for password control, we use the input tag, and then we change the type to password. Save it. Let's give it a name called txt_pass. And when we refresh on the browser, as you can see, it's there. When I type in, you see it's a password control. It's not the same as a text box where you can see everything. Let's send this to its own line. We need to insert the BR tag saying go to the next line, refresh. Now it goes to the next line. We need a label there. So I'm going to copy this label. We need to link it to this control. Take the ID, paste it in the for. Now they're linked. This label is now linked to this control. For displaying purposes, we're going to say password. Save it, refresh in the browser. Now the user knows, okay, I need to enter my password here. Let's enter a checkbox now. So a checkbox is the same. We use the input tag, and the type we change it to checkbox. Let's change the name to CHK. Remember, refresh it, save it, go to the browser, refresh, and we have a checkbox there. But we need to send it in its own line, so we're going to use the BR tag. Save it, it's in the BR, but it needs the label there because the user does not know what this checkbox is for. So we copy, save it. So we're going to send, we're not going to display this label above the control. We're going to display this next to it. So this option says, for displaying purposes, we're going to say remember me. We're going to call it, so this label is linked. We want to link this label to this control. Okay, let's not link it. I want to show you what's going to happen. When we refresh, we can see remember me is there. We don't want this colon there. Save it, refresh. Okay, remove the colon. And then this checkbox, this label is for this checkbox. So when I click on this checkbox, you can see it's checked. But when I click on this label, it does not check the checkbox. So that's why we need to link each control to the label. Let's go back. Now let's link these two. To link, we take the ID in the for, we paste this, so now it knows, okay, this label is for this control. Sweet. Let's refresh it, because now it knows when I click on this, the remember me label, it checks the checkbox for me, which is very convenient for your users. So as you can see, we did not display this label above the control. Why? Because we don't want that. This looks weird. For checkboxes, we want the label to be on this side. So that is why we put the label here, so that it's on this side of the control, right? So now we have our controls are there, but now we need some sort of a button that when we click and then it submits that information. This is where the submit button comes in. So for the submit button, we say input type, we say submit. So now it knows, okay, I need to enter submit button there. We need to give it a name. We're going to call it submit, btn submit. You don't have to call it this. Remember, for IDs, you can call these controls anything you want. It's not going to make any difference. You could call it jump. It wouldn't matter. So let's save it, refresh it. Now we have a submit button there. We don't want this here, so we're going to send it to its own line. We use the BR. Save it, refresh in the browser. Now it's in its own line. If you want to change what's displayed here, if you don't want submit query for instance, you can use the value attribute. So we're going to say login. You want to display login for the user. Refresh. Now it says login, but the button still does the same function. We just changed what's displayed on the button itself. So when I click the button, now it takes me to where we specified. Remember, we said we want this to go to this URL, and as you can see there, it goes directly to that URL that we specified. So if you wanted this to go to, let's say, jump PHP, if you want it to go to the jump PHP page, when we submit this, it goes to, you see, the jump, as you can see, the jump PHP page. All right, so let's add an attribute to the dropdown. So if you want a specific option to be selected by default, you need to enter this attribute. Just say selected. So by default, it will select this option. So as you can see, it's not working yet. That is because this dropdown is missing the name, which is another way to uniquely identify a control. So I'm just going to use both the ID and the name. Refresh it, and now the cashier option is selected by default. So that's it about forms. That's the basics of forms. In the next tutorial, we'll be combining forms and tables, and we'll look at that. Remember this table where we used the input tag, we said type and we entered text. That showed us a text field. If you want a password object there, you just say password in between this. You say input. Remember, guys, you say input. Remember, you say input type and what you want to display. In this case, let's say we want to display a password. You put a password there. You name it anything. If you want a radio button, you can put it there and look, and you'll observe the difference between a radio button and a checkbox. I think we need to look at that in the next video. Or if you want date, you can put it there. Email, you can put it there, and so forth. File. So you can play around with these. But before we move on, let's just add one more thing to our form. The email, remember we said here, the type email, and this is type text. And when you observe this, they do the same thing. But what's unique about an email, when I click login, the browser says please enter an email address because it's not a valid email address. So that is what's unique. That is the difference between the text and the email control. But the email control is a new control in HTML5, so it's not supported in all the browsers. But the text box, password, and all of the rest are not new, so they are submitted. So that is the difference. So that is it, guys, with this video. In the next video, we're going to talk about the difference between a checkbox and a radio box. That is very confusing. We're going to add a table, and we're going to do some other fun stuff. So watch out for the next video. Cheers.